Mr. ZUBY, what's up, man? Glad to have you out here to Maine.
No doubt, man. Happy to be here, brother.
Did you come to Maine on your last visit, or is this your first trip out here?
No, it's my first time in Maine ever.
We've had a lot of really good conversations just in the past 24 hours. I kind of wish we would have been able to hit record from the minute we started talking to now.
Yeah, man.
But we'll still have some good conversations.
Absolutely, dude. I'm all about conversation.
What are you thinking about your trip out here?
Man, I'm so happy to be out in the States again. I'm so happy to be out in the States again. It's been 2 years since I was last out. A lot of stuff has happened, and my own profile and the platform of my message has grown very, very significantly since the last time I was out. And it's one thing to see numbers go up online, but as I was saying to you before, it's another thing to have people coming up to you in different cities, even places you've never been before, telling you about how you've impacted their life in a positive way, or just helped them to feel more sane throughout this 18-month period with all of this weird pandemic-related stuff going on. Whether you've helped them with the physical aspect and mental aspect through my book, Strong Advice, or just following me on Twitter or listening to my music, whatever it is, the fact that people of all different ages and walks of life are able to take something positive from what I do, and the fact that that's now a global phenomenon. I mean, I'm from the UK, so to be out here in US, in Maine, Florida, Texas, all these different places, and there's people who know who I am and care about what I'm doing and are so happy and excited to see me. That's phenomenal.
What do you attribute the amount of growth that you've had with your social media profiles and platforms and everything that you're doing? You know, because there's a lot of people out there who are putting content out, right? But aren't as growing as rapidly as you.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because of authenticity. And I think it's because although I can only ever speak for myself, and I only ever intend to speak for myself, as a byproduct of that, I do speak for hundreds of millions, potentially billions of people who share my thoughts and who perhaps are not able to articulate some of them in the same way I do, or even if they can articulate them, they don't have access to hundreds of thousands or millions of people to hear what they're saying. So to give an example, during this 18-month period, no matter where you are in the world, everyone's been dealing with this COVID thing. People have questions, people have concerns about the virus itself, but then also at this stage, largely the response, right? You're seeing all these different governments responding in different ways. People are worried about loss of their freedom. People are worried about their mental health, their physical health, all of the downstream economic impact, so on and so forth, impact on children. And the media is not keen to really talk about this. So the mainstream sources, you're not getting a lot of those open, honest conversations and questioning, whereas all throughout I'm there raising my own questions and my own concerns and voicing my opinions. And lo and behold, there are millions and millions of people out there, possibly billions, who feel the same way. And perhaps they're afraid. A lot of people are afraid to voice it. Other people are voicing it, but they don't have access to a large platform. Some people want to voice it, but they don't really know how to. Not everyone's great at articulating their thoughts.
Sure.
And as a rapper and as a podcaster and as a public speaker, that's my job. All I really do is articulate thoughts and ideas in a way that other people struggle to. It's the same way that
I was going to say, you said something interesting last night. We're sitting around, my wife and you and I were sitting around talking, and you said you had this thought, and I saw a little bit of it like the gears turning in your head, and you said something to the effect of, I just need to figure out the right way to word the message so it like resonates. Yeah. And I think that's what you're talking about here is you don't just dump out whatever, word vomit, whatever comes to mind. You're very deliberate and calculated about the way that you communicate a message so that people can receive it.
Yeah. A lot of it is also just thinking out loud. And I think perhaps that takes a level of courage to do. So a lot of people follow my Twitter account. I've got one of the most active Twitter accounts on the entire platform. And with a lot of that, it's just me thinking out loud. Sometimes it's things that I've thought about a lot and I've formulated and I'm writing it in a particular way, as you said. Oftentimes, or me having this conversation with you right now, I'm just thinking out loud. I used to keep my thoughts very much to myself. And then I found both through my music and through social media and video and podcasting, actually there's a lot of value, not just for myself, but in the world, and just sharing those thoughts and ideas and getting that feedback. You can only do so much thinking by yourself. If you just sit in a room alone and you think about any idea, you're limited in your capacity. You need another person or other people to bounce ideas off of.
Or to challenge a particular thought, which we've done plenty of. You know, I said something like, I don't agree because of this. And that isn't, I think people take that in today's culture as like a verbal attack or a microaggression. And when you and I have minor disagreements, it's like, I take it as a challenge of like, well, let's flesh this out. Like, here's my thought. Well, here's my thought. And we come to some mutual, understanding. Absolutely,
man. Steel sharpens steel. I mean, I know you do jujitsu training, right? How much training can you do alone?
Yeah, I mean,
right?
None. Right.
Well, you can do some.
I mean, you can work on technique, but you got to have somebody pushing against you. Yeah,
you need someone else there to optimize your training, right? Physical or mental. And it's the same. You can also do the same thing online. If I'm there and I just put a tweet out or I put a video out and I choose to just share it out there, but maybe it's only an idea I've thought halfway through, or maybe I just have a question. I just have a question. I'm just like, okay, why aren't we talking more about natural immunity? Right? That's something that's strangely absent from the general conversation. You've had this, hundreds of millions of people have contracted this particular virus and thus now have the antibodies. Why is that not part of the narrative? Where are the journalists saying, why aren't the journalists saying, hey, what about natural immunity? What about this? What about that? Right? And so I'm just putting that out there. And also by me putting it out there, it gives inverted commas permission for other people to then broach that, because people are kind of scared and worried and they're like, ooh, can I talk about this? Can I talk about that? And actually by someone prominent, and there's people with way bigger platforms. I mean, this is something Joe Rogan is great at. Like, if he broaches a subject, then it kind of shifts the Overton window slightly. So it's like, oh, now people are willing to talk about that particular thing because he kind of gave permission. So I think that's a lot of the value of it. And I always say conversations are so important on every level because there's only ever three ways to solve any conflict. There is conversation and debate and discussion. There is separation, segregation, divorce, or there's physical violence. That's all. Those are the only three ways you can solve any conflict. It doesn't matter if you're talking between countries, between a husband and a wife, between siblings, between friends, political, religious, whatever. Those are the only three options. So that first channel always has to stay open. Whenever people start trying to close that first channel down, that's why it's part of why I'm very anti-censorship, anti-deplatforming, anti this concept of, oh, you can't talk to this person, you can't talk to that person. Because if you can't do that, then it leads to the second, right? Which you do see when you're seeing people, oh, I unfriended my friend on Facebook because he won't vote for Trump. I disinvited my cousin from my wedding because they won't take the vaccine. I dropped my friend because he voted for Brexit, or all of this nonsense. It's like, okay, so you're choosing now to segregate society.
But isn't there a time and a place where that actually makes sense?
Potentially. As I said, that is a way to solve a conflict, right? You go your way, I'll go my way. You just think, right? That's what a divorce is, right? Two people who were married, they've decided, or at a lower level, a relationship breakup. You know what? This is not working. There's this conflict. It's not working. The best way forward is for us to separate. That doesn't mean that the discussion necessarily has to totally break down either, but that's a way. I mean, to some degree, you could say that this is what, although it happens somewhat organically, countries are like that to some extent, whereas they communicate. But if you have like a huge clash of cultures or totally different belief system, it's like, okay, well, we're this country over here, we're this country over here. You guys do your thing, we'll do our thing. You can still communicate, etc. But even still, in those cases, if the communication breaks down totally and those individuals or groups come into contact, then they come into conflict. That's true. That's because what wars are.
There might be some boundaries there. Again, I'm thinking about it through the lens you're looking at, whether it's a country or relationship or whatever. And there are usually some boundaries there that, whether or not they're communicated, are there, right? There's even boundaries between friends. You and I have boundaries, right? Whether we communicate them or not. Yeah. And if we don't communicate those boundaries, it's likely that I'll cross your boundary or you'll cross mine, even if it's not with no ill intent. It just happens, and then you react or I react, and so it goes.
It does. And, communication is, I think being a powerful communicator and being competent at communicating is, I think more than ever, it's rare, and it's a little bit of a superpower. Whether you're talking online or offline, I think that a lot of people, especially younger people, have become really bad at communicating. Just very poor communicators. I think this is why you're also seeing this, the rise of, whether it's cancel culture or it's these students at universities who can't handle a speaker who they disagree with. And so it's all shut it down, deplatform, shut it down, censor. It's not okay. Let's have these conversations and let's share ideas and let's try to understand each other. I mean, you see this across, the most obvious example would be just across the political aisle. When you have this, it's sort of an artificial binary split where you have, the left and the right, or Democrats and Republicans, labor and conservative, however you want to put it, liberal versus conservative, whatever. And people in the past, sure, there's always been political conflict. That's not anything new. However, if you were to just go back to the 90s or even the early thousands, it wasn't as polarized, right? There wasn't this notion that everyone who votes for the other party or the other candidate is somehow evil.
Yeah, an evil piece of human debris or something.
Right. I don't know. I mean, maybe this did happen to some degree in the past, but this notion of segregating yourself from your own family members, your own friends. I mean, that's literally a person saying that their allegiance to the party is more important than their relationship with their brother, their sister, their son,
do you
their
think
daughter.
Do you think that's the thought going through their mind? Because I think the thought would be more, my allegiance to my ideology is more important than this relationship, and they look at it as a virtuous thing.
They do, but they're wrong.
Right. And whether they're right or wrong, I agree, but I think that's how they're viewing it. I don't think they look at themselves as like a party person.
I don't necessarily think they do, but oftentimes people, the way they frame it or the way they think of it isn't necessarily what it is, right?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah,
if you no longer talk to your brother because he voted for a different political party, not because he did anything to you or because, but he voted a way I don't like, then by definition you are putting politics over family. You are putting the party over family by definition, right? You know he's not a.
I guess the reason
person.
I ask is because it's this concept of tribalism, right? And I think we're all tribal, whether it's Team ZUBY or the Red Sox is your team or what. Like we all have tribes, right? Yeah. But I don't know that people believe themselves to be as susceptible to group think, to tribe think, as they actually are.
Yeah, I agree with you. And this is why it's important for people to be aware of this. Because if you're aware of your own... Look, there's a lot of forms of cognitive errors. There's cognitive dissonance, groupthink, sunk cost fallacy, confirmation bias, tribal allegiance, so on and so forth, peer pressure. We're all subject to... Nobody has perfect thinking.
Right.
Nobody's thinking is perfectly rational and unemotional and so on and so forth. So we're all subject to this, right? And you see it in different ways. I mean, even you invest in the stock market, right? Or you invest in cryptocurrency, and when the price is going up and up and up, what feeling is generated? You want to buy more of it,
which
right?
you shouldn't do.
Exactly. Even when you're aware of that, and then the price drops. You're in Bitcoin. Price dropped 10% in a day. The urge is to sell.
Sure.
The urge is to sell, even though logically, if you think calmly and rationally, assuming you believe in the investment, that's the time to buy, right? But human beings have these cognitive errors. If you look into the Ash experiment, which is the one where they draw the lines. I don't know if you've seen that.
Keep going, maybe. I don't know.
Okay, the Ash experiment is where there's a room full of people, and really one person at a time is being tested, and they draw different lines on the board, right? Okay. You draw 3 lines, and they're of different lengths, and you ask the group, okay, which one is the longest? And you can clearly see which one is the longest, but if the majority of people say that the shorter one is the longest, then the person being tested who's not in on this will
They'll go
normally,
to that.
majority of times, they will go with what the group says.
Isn't that interesting?
Even though with their own two eyes, they can see that that line is longer than the other one, but they pick the shorter one because everyone else is picking the shorter one.
Have you seen the experiment they did along the same lines? And I have heard of that experiment. They're at maybe a doctor's office or some sort of waiting room to go into a meeting, and the people who are part of the project, one of them will stand up every 5 minutes or whatever. And at first, the person who comes in and doesn't know about it's like, why is this person standing up? And if they have like 2 or 3 people standing up every 5 minutes and then sitting down, that person who doesn't know anything about the project will also stand up with them.
Yep.
Then when the controlled people leave, that person will continue to do it even when new people come in, and that's just trickles down from there, and they don't even know why they're doing it.
No, this happens. I mean, we've seen this with the mask thing.
Yes.
You see it with the mask thing, and you can. I'm sure over the past 18 months, regardless of where you live, if you're listening to this, and again, no one is immune to this because human beings are social creatures. If you walk into a room of 50 people and nobody is wearing a mask, if you wear a mask, you feel weird.
Yes,
right?
you feel totally out of place.
And
100%.
in most cases, that person will take it off to be in the majority. Similarly, if you've ever been in a room, I know this because I haven't worn masks very much at all throughout this whole thing, but still, if you go in somewhere where everyone is wearing one and you're the one who's not, you feel a sense of social pressure, even if no one says anything.
Definitely.
You feel like the odd one out. And so oftentimes people will put it on just to comply. No, and this shows, people are not worried about like a virus in itself in many cases. It's more about fitting in. It's more about the compliance and acceptance. And the majority of people want to be in the majority. That's just how human beings are. It takes a certain personality trait to not really care about what other people are doing and to not give into that.
When is that? So, there's times where obviously that's appropriate. I think about a scenario where there might be some sort of, let's take a natural disaster, or you're climbing Mount Everest. Clearly there's going to be somebody who has more expertise or knowledge, is capable of handling and navigating that situation. And at times it makes sense to default to that individual.
Absolutely.
So when is that appropriate? And when is it not appropriate, and when should you be standing up?
That's a great question, man. I think for me personally, and everyone is going to be different with this. For me personally, I'm not someone who honestly has ever really cared about fitting in with the majority. I'm just wired that way. And for me, it just comes down to, does this make sense to me? Right? So I don't have a problem with authority in itself.
When you say does it make sense, are you talking about logically, or is that sort of an intuition? Like, what is that feeling for you?
I mean logically. Okay, so to use the same example, because it's timely, and I know I talk about the COVID thing a lot, but to me, it's psychologically, it's been such a fascinating experiment. Okay, so if you were to take the mask thing, okay, can you pass on a virus you don't have?
No.
Okay, so if you are not sick, and if you don't have the virus, why are you wearing a mask? Right? You're trying to stop yourself from spreading. Assuming, there's a whole nother debate about whether masks do anything, but even assuming they worked, it would only make sense for somebody who is sick and maybe they're coughing or sneezing, etc., to wear one and wear a specific one that would actually block transmission if they're sick and they're in public, right? There's no logical reason why someone wandering around outside or driving in the car alone or whatever, anyone not sick, period, there's no logic to wear a mask.
Well, I think the argument to that in particular, there's two that I've heard.
Okay.
One is, asymptomatic. The other is, and we've heard even Fauci say this, is I want people to see, like I'm putting on, it's performative.
It's performative.
Right? I'm putting this on so people have a quote unquote good example. I think he said something along those lines. So that's the argument to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, neither of those are good arguments to me. So I won't do it. And that's it for me, right? That's the calculation. It's not me trying to be a jerk or to go against the grain for the sake of going against the grain or whatever. I'm just like, no, that doesn't make sense. So I don't care how many other people are doing it. It doesn't make sense. I mean, if someone said that to go into a supermarket, you should walk in backwards.
No, it's like
Right?
your mom
Or you
used to
should-
say, like, if your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too?
Yeah,
It's the same thing.
Exactly, right? Or something that's, not even that, life or death.
Sure.
Right? If it was just simply, every time you walk through a doorway, you should walk through backwards.
Right.
Because science, right? I'd be like, that makes no sense. I'm not doing that. Right? I'm not doing that because it doesn't make sense. If it makes sense, I'm happy to follow rules. I'm happy to follow authority that makes sense. Sure. I'm not by default someone who's a rule breaker or a rebel or whatever. I'm just like, wait, hang on. Especially if you're introducing something that's very much an inverse or antithetical to normal human behavior. Mm-hmm. Okay, so prior to 2020, nobody wore a mask in public unless you're trying to rob somebody or you're trying to steal from a bank or something.
Hide who you are.
Nobody did it. So if you're going to introduce something that is so, literally the reverse of normalcy, then you need to have a darn good reason why you're doing it. Like, I'm not someone who's just going to be like, yes, sir. Oh, Fauci said, or, the authority. It's like, no, the authority needs to have a reason. If they're like, you know what, wash your hands. I mean, I already wash my hands, but it's like, yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Why? Because you get germs, bacteria, virus, they're on your hands, you're going about and about. Perfectly makes sense. It's totally logical. If they say, when you enter a restaurant, you should wear a mask because you enter, and then once you're seated, you can take your. I'm not doing that. That's stupid.
COVID only works at certain heights. Anything above 3 to 4 feet. So we're safe right now because we're sitting down.
Yeah. So that doesn't make sense. If they say, oh, if you're sick, if you've got a cold, you're sneezing, whatever, you should stay at home and maybe get it. I'm like, sure. I mean, I had COVID, and I knew when I was like, ooh, I'm feeling kind of. I was like, I should get a test because I don't want to. Lo and behold. Actually, most people don't want to spread diseases, right? Even if you have a cold, most people will avoid going out and about in public and potentially giving it to someone. I didn't need
and they're respectful of other people. Of course.
Yeah, I do also trust in human. This is the thing about a free society, is you have to allow adults to make decisions, even if sometimes those decisions are not always what is best for them, and even sometimes potentially impact other people.
Right.
That's just part of living in a free society. There's always going to be a trade-off between freedom and liberty and at least the perception of safety and security.
Well, and not only that, so let's take COVID and let's say that I'm deeply concerned about COVID, and you're not. Let's just throw this out there as a hypothetical. And you decide to go unmasked, and you go to the store, and you go to the movies, and you live your life the way that you see fit. Well, people will say, well, you have to worry about other people like me, who is deeply concerned, for example, of COVID. But I get to make decisions too. And it's not your responsibility to acquiesce to my concerns and my lifestyle, right? And I think that's where a lot of society has gone, is that, well, you have to be deeply careful and care about other people. And they forget that other people can make their own decisions. If you're afraid of COVID, stay inside. You have to live your life too, but it's nobody's responsibility to make you feel good or better about the way you choose to live or the way you choose to respond to scenarios.
Yeah, it's the infantilization of society. It's treating adults as if they are just children, perhaps even toddlers, who literally don't know at all what is good for them or what is safe. And honestly, I think it's quite insulting. Even with the notion over the last year, the whole narrative was about saving grandma, right? Protecting the elderly, so on. I mean, you're talking about people who have been on the earth for 6, 7, 8 decades. They clearly know how to survive.
Well, not only that, why don't you let grandma and grandpa make that decision?
That's what I'm saying. Right? You're trying to make decisions. I'm not going to try to make decisions, tell someone who's 40 years my senior what is best for them or exactly what, or try to force them. You could say, look, these are the guidelines. Look, this is who it's affecting. These are the potential hospitalization and death rates. And look, if I ran things, my approach would be very simple. I'm very pro information and I'm very pro liberty. Okay. It would be, as the data comes out, it would have been, okay, look, these are the risks in different age groups. Okay. If you're under 20, honestly, this thing's a nothing burger. honestly, the probability of you getting hospitalized, let alone dying, is microscopic. It's less dangerous than the flu, right? You've got a much greater risk of freaking lightning strikes, like let alone drowning and traffic accidents and things like that. If you're under 30 and you're remotely healthy, same thing. Under 40 and you're healthy, mostly same thing. If you're over 50, especially if you have some comorbidities, you might want to exercise some caution and give people the numbers.
Right.
Give people the numbers, right? And then say, oh, okay, if you're over 70, especially if you have one or two more comorbidities, it's not a death sentence, but at worst, you could be talking maybe somewhere between a 5%, 10% potential death rate. Mm-hmm. So especially prior to treatments becoming available, et cetera, we'd recommend you take these particular cautions. If you've got to stay home or work from home or do this or have someone deliver your groceries for you to minimize exposure, whatever it is. And again, this should still be your choice. This should still be your choice. But this is what we recommend. That would have been my approach. But
the problem with what you're saying is you can't consolidate power using that approach.
I know, but this is the thing, right? The people
it's not a problem for me. Yeah. I'm saying, and the people in power, that's the problem, is they don't get to consolidate more and grasp more of it if they let people make their decisions.
I'm fully aware, and this is a huge problem in politics, is that oftentimes the people in these positions are the people who are power hungry. Mm-hmm. They're often the people who you'd actually least want in those positions. So a lot of times why it's hard to get good people into politics is because they don't actually want to control everybody else that much, right? So naturally you attract people who are much more authoritarian and who lack the humility to accept that they actually don't know. I mean, the notion that one person, whether it's the governor of a state or the mayor of a city or the president or prime minister of a country, the notion that one person or a small couple dozen people know 100% with certainty what is best for millions and millions of people is absurd to me.
It is.
Right? They don't even know your name. Right? People are out there acting as if these so-called leaders care so much about them and care more about your own grandma and granddad and parents than you do.
Right.
Which again is insulting.
Right.
I'm like, look, no one cares about my family.
As it should be.
More than no one cares about your family.
Of course.
More than you do. So with them coming out trying to mandate, look, Ryan, this is, if you want to protect your kids, you want to do, like, they don't even know who your kids are. They don't care about your kids. They don't even know who you are. And they're trying to force this and force that and force this. And whereas you've done your own risk analysis and calculation and thought, okay, this is what makes sense. There could well be families or individuals where they need to be hyper cautious because they've got a family member who's elderly and they've got these various conditions and they've got a weakened immune system. And so that particular group of people needs to exercise a much, much higher level of caution.
And that's their responsibility to bear.
And it's also their liberty. I 100% support their right to do that. I'd even go as far as saying, if you're going to have, given where we are in society, where you've got taxes and you've got trillions of dollars or pounds to deploy in various groups, I'd even say, look, let's direct the resources towards those people, right? Keep people working, right? If you're young and you're healthy, like, what are you doing stopping people going to work, pulling kids out of school, all that? Keep people working, keep the system going, and then we can direct some resources towards the 10% of people who genuinely are at risk from the virus itself, right? And they're caretakers, right? If it means they need 6 months, they need even 1 year until we've got some things worked out, I'm like, cool, that makes sense. But instead, it's all been this one size fits all. Lock down everybody.
Right.
Take all the kids out of school. Lock down this. Shut all the businesses. And it's just like, this was totally unnecessary. But yeah, coming back away from the pandemic situation, though, what I was saying, I think how we got into this was just thinking about what makes sense, right? Just thinking about what makes sense and where possible, avoiding, look, we all have emotions and we all should have emotions, because if human beings were just 100% pure, rational, with no emotion at all, it would actually be a very cold and evil world, right? But also, if people are so caught up in their emotions that they totally ignore facts and data and reality, then you're also in trouble. There has to be a healthy balance. And the problem with fear and anxiety is it shuts down people's rational thinking, right? People resort to that lizard brain,
It's like
hind
that
brain,
primal brain, right?
yeah, which can easily, when you couple it with tribalism, it can get very dangerous. Or when you couple it with a situation where actually you need calm thinking and thinking about not just first order consequences, but second, third, and fourth order consequences. You need people who are calm, clear thinkers to talk, have these discussions. You need to open up and allow these discussions to take place. Because even now, again, you're seeing all the fallout. So, I mean, April last year, March last year, I was there literally on Twitter saying the response is more dangerous than the thing being responded to.
Sure.
Right? Because you can see and you can predict what the fallout is going to be, the economic fallout, unemployment, effect on children, mental health, physical health, people missing diagnoses of other more deadly diseases such as cancer, people missing their treatments. This is still going on. You've had thousands and thousands, possibly millions of people who are now going to die of cancer because they
couldn't get the treatments.
They couldn't get the treatment,
Right.
or it got
Or
diagnosed too late.
Right.
Exactly. There's so many things. Inflation. There are so many, let alone, the impact on civil liberties, human rights. There are so many things that you could see if you kept a calm head and you thought, okay, well, whoa, lockdowns. Okay, that's unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to shut down the whole economy, shut down all these businesses, take kids out of school, stop this, stop this, stop this. Like, what's going to be the consequences of that? This is the thing people didn't weigh up properly. It was just, nope, shut up, just don't kill grandma. We just need to shut everything down, just like very myopic tunnel vision.
Do you think that the powers that be, the government officials and the bureaucrats and all of this knew those consequences, and that's why they're wielding this the way they are? And then citizens are more ignorant to the devious desires of those other people? Or do you think even at the top levels, they didn't see the consequences?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there are malevolent people out there who know damn well what they're doing.
Yeah,
I believe that. They know that, they are intentionally trying to crush small and medium businesses. They are trying to make people more reliant on the government. They are trying to create this two-tier society. They are putting profits over people. I believe all of that exists. I also think that I think that exists primarily at the top, but I think that amongst everyday people, or say everyday healthcare workers or whatever it is, I think it's more people end up sort of being useful idiots for people who are malevolent, right? That's what I think is going on. I do believe the average person generally has good intentions. That doesn't mean that always manifests in a good way, but I think that by the time they're making the decision and they're saying things, they do think they're saying what's right. But oftentimes they're basing that off incorrect premises, which is also, again, this is part of why conversation is so important, because you could be barreling down the wrong road and then you just need someone to go, wait, tap you on the shoulder and go, wait, hang on, man. What about this? Right? So say somebody who, okay, let's take an extreme country, New Zealand, right? In terms of response. Okay.
Sure,
so
right.
Their notion is they want zero COVID.
Zero.
Right. So anytime there's a case, lock down the entire country. Nobody comes in, nobody goes out, lock everything down, everybody stays home. Say you've got somebody who thinks that is the best approach. And there are people who think this is the best approach. I've even spoken to people in New Zealand who think like, yeah, the government is handling this great. This is the best approach. And I want to talk to that person and say, have you thought, what are the, number one, what's the exit strategy? But number two, what are the consequences of this? Think about socially, economically, financially, the impact on children, the impact on mental health,
Your liberties,
anxiety,
like you were
depression,
talking about
your own rights.
Right.
Take 10 different factors. Like what about, so let's say, okay, you get COVID down, but what about all these other things? And also how many more people die as a result of that, right? Think about it. So here, let's take an analogy. Let's say thousands of people every year die in car accidents. There is no question that in terms of car accidents, you could reduce car accident deaths very significantly by lowering the speed limit to 30 miles per hour.
Or not having cars, or
Yeah, but
there's 1,000 things.
let's not even go that far. Let's say the national speed limit's what, 70, 80?
Yeah, I mean, it depends
Yeah?
on the state,
Okay.
but I think, 75. I think on a highway,
okay,
sure.
generally about 75. If you reduced it to 30 miles per hour, fact, you would cut the amount of road deaths probably by at least 80%. Right? If you crash at 30 miles per hour.
Yeah, you're not going to die.
Yeah,
Sure.
If you crash at 30 miles per hour versus you crash at 75 miles per hour, the chance of survival is way, way, way higher. This is why in lots of residential areas, school zones, et cetera, it's 20
Lower,
to 30.
sure.
Okay? So someone could say, oh, well, you know what? Like we've got thousands of people every year dying in car accidents. Let's reduce the speed limit to 30 miles per hour. Let's save lives. What is the downstream impact of that? What are the second, third, fourth order consequences? I can almost guarantee you that more people would end up dying.
What makes you say that?
Because there's not just one source of death. Okay? So if you do this, then think of all the logistics. Think of all the trucks that deliver food, water, gas, groceries, everything all around the country. Now they are massively delayed. In getting the whole logistical system breaks down. You now have shortages of groceries. You now have shortages of water. Perhaps electricity grids go down, et cetera. And that leads to more poverty, more damage, and more death. So yeah, you've cut down road deaths now, but now people are dying of all these other things.
Congratulations. You got that one factor down.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is what people have been doing with the COVID situations, right? It's like you're focused on that one number. We're driving that number down, but it's like, yo, you've got all these people now dying of other things. People are being plunged into poverty. I remember seeing videos from the USA last year where people were mile-long lines for food banks, right? People, all of a sudden you had, 80 million plunged into unemployment, something ridiculous like that at the peak?
Yeah.
People now can't feed their families. I think it's been predicted globally that over 200 million people have been plunged into poverty as a result of the response, not the virus itself.
Yeah, the response to
but
it.
the response. Over 200 million people last time I checked.
This is why, when it first started, everything kind of first started, it was 14 days to slow the spread. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. We don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. Maybe in the meantime, we start to figure out some treatments.
Sure.
We start working on a vaccine. Yeah, that makes sense. And we focus or we change or shift our priorities based on what's in front of us. This is a threat. Let's figure it out. And then once the threat is taken care of and we slowed the spread, hospitals weren't overwhelmed, figuring out new treatments, then we start opening it back up and looking at these other factors that they aren't considering right now, like the ones you're talking about.
Yeah, that's the thing. And to do that, it needs a calm head. It needs a calm head, because if you just look at the problem right in front of you and you forget about because look, every policy, if you want to talk about politics, every policy has trade-offs.
Yeah,
everything is trade-offs, right?
There's always a cost, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't consider trade-offs certainly in the political world, but even just in general. That this is just the truth of life, is there are always going to be trade-offs. There's always going to be trade-offs. And one of the most obvious ones, as I said before, is freedom versus, I would say, the illusion or perception of safety. Take another big one, okay? I'm from the UK, you're from the USA. Yesterday we were talking about guns, okay? So a lot of people in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, in many places, they look at the USA and they're like, man, they've got the gun thing there is crazy, right? That's so dangerous. It's so dangerous, right? Whereas Americans are like, no, this is our freedom. This is our liberty. Okay. And I can understand both perspectives.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. But again, when you have many people who say you've got someone who's very, very anti-gun rights, okay, and they just want to say, just ban guns, right? Just ban guns. Again, because they're looking at the numbers they'll be looking at
mass shootings, that sort of, right?
Yeah, right. They'll be looking at very particular things. They're not looking at how many lives are saved by guns to begin with. First of all, they're certainly not thinking about what are the consequences in terms of potential governmental tyranny, or if another country were to try to invade the USA. They're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about self-defense. They're just thinking, oh my gosh, X number of people. There were X number of mass shootings in the USA. We need to get rid of the guns. There were this many homicides or whatever it is. They're also not thinking of, okay, if you disarm the general population, who is left with the guns, right? Is it just going to be the criminals, whatever, right? They're not thinking, it's a very emotional, short-term myopic way of thinking in my own mind, right?
It's
And
very
then-
focused on one, like you're saying, one element instead of zooming back and saying, okay, yes, that is a potential route that we can go. Let's explore it and let's zoom out and see how it might impact these other areas of life.
And then also because of the tribalism and due to lazy thinking, people also then want to always demonize the other side, right? So if a mass shooting happens and you are not, if a mass shooting happens and you yourself express your support of gun rights, what will they call you? You're a murderer. You don't care about children.
course.
You don't care about people dying. You're maybe even a terrorist. You're this, you're that. We see it happen every time. Like it's the same narrative. And they're trying to do that to emotionally manipulate and blackmail people to give up their rights. They've done it with this one, right? You're killing grandma.
Yeah.
You don't care about other people. You're selfish. You're this. It's the name calling, right? Even though you are, all that you're doing is you're thinking holistically. Sure, you may have a different perspective, but you're also thinking holistically.
Or maybe you're not. Maybe someone who's a gun advocate is actually not looking at it holistically, and they're looking at it from their small window too, right?
Exactly.
So now you
Exactly.
have two windows that people are peering through, and they're looking at different things, and there's a much broader perspective for everybody.
And this is why you need to bring people together and let people talk, because by definition, you can't see your own blind spots. If you can see it, it's not a
It's
blind
not
spot.
a blind spot,
Right?
right?
So, and we all have our own leanings and beliefs and ideologies, and there's 7 billion plus people on earth. That means you've got 7 billion plus different sets of opinions and ideas and, experiences, etc. There's stuff that I can talk about. I can speak eloquently and with knowledge about a lot of subjects. I have tons of blind spots, though. Even in stuff that I know about, there will be an aspect. Okay, someone brings it up. You know what? That's a good point. I haven't thought of that factor. And then they say something else, and I'm like, you know what? You haven't thought of this part. And the more people you actually get, if you have 5 people, then you get a better conversation because each person has a view. You've literally, think even visually, you've literally got a different perspective. I cannot see what's behind me right now.
Right. But
You
I
can.
can. I can look over there and say,
Yep,
this is what's behind you.
You can literally see what's behind me. So you can get those different angles and different perspectives, and then you have a clear 360 view of the situation. And not beyond that, you also create more empathy, which is something that is really missing. This notion of people not being able to understand someone else's perspective at all. And when people can't do that, they often ascribe the worst possible motive to it. Let's go back to 2016. In the UK, you had Brexit. In the USA, you had Trump's election. In both situations, there were millions of people, including people in the media, who tried to simply paint it as everyone who voted for Brexit is racist.
Right.
Everyone who voted for Trump is racist and is supporting white supremacy. They took the worst possible reason that somebody could have voted for that thing. Is it possible? I am sure that there are a very small number, very tiny percentage, microscopic percentage. I'm sure there are a percentage of Americans who actually are racist and they just voted for Trump because
Of
they
course.
thought that, they liked some of the inflammatory rhetoric and that exists. But just because that exists, you can't then take that and say, okay, well, that is the reason
Apply it
for,
broadly,
and apply that to 70 million people or whatever it is. I'm sure that there are some people who voted for Brexit just because they wanted to shut the borders and, they don't like these brown immigrants coming. I think this is under 1% of people, right? So I'm not even denying that exists, but then to take that and to cast it across all these other people. And I always say, look, if you don't, this is the thing that blows my mind, even in 2020, and I'm still seeing people like, man, I don't understand how anyone could have voted for Trump. I'm like, why don't you ask them?
Yeah.
Right?
Ask them openly ask.
Yes. Yeah. Not in an accusatory fashion.
Right.
Like, for me, it's not difficult to understand why someone would vote in any of these particular directions. I don't find it particularly difficult to understand why somebody would vote for Joe Biden or would vote for Trump or would vote for Brexit or against it. I don't find any of those hard to understand. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I don't find it difficult to understand why somebody would not. Right? Because I have empathy and because I have conversations and because I don't excommunicate everybody from my life who doesn't share my exact opinion. I have some
Yeah.
fantastic atheistic friends. We can sit and have like a 3-hour discussion about whether or not God exists and how human beings came into existence and where morality comes from. We can have all of these conversations, and he knows I'm a good guy who's coming from a good place. I know he's a good guy coming from a good place. We're not there insulting each other and calling each other stupid. I'm not there saying, man, you're just going to burn in hell and you're just like a nihilist and whatever. And he's not like, you're just some dummy who believes in Sky Daddy, whatever, right? Like,
Sky Daddy.
right? Like taking the dumbest version of the argument and ascribing bad motive. It's just like, look, we respect each other.
Right.
I know you're a good person. You know I'm a good person. So if we have a difference of opinion on a topic, let's assume, as we know each other, that we're coming from a decent place, and let's try to understand each other. Even if we still disagree on like a real core fundamental issue, I can now at least understand. I get where you're coming from.
Right.
Right. We disagree, and oftentimes you'll find that the point of disagreement is like a particular. It's like a very particular thing, right?
Like a specific thing, or what do you mean?
Yeah. So beyond what people believe, it's interesting to understand the epistemology of why they believe it, because we all have a line of thinking. So every belief you have that you've considered, you've come to it through a line of thinking, which you call epistemology.
Got it. Okay.
Right? And even if two people reach the same conclusion, they can have a different chain
The way
of
they
thought
got to that conclusion.
that's led to it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Sure.
So when you have that conversation and you kind of work it backwards, you'll often find that there's a point of divergence, right? And it's not usually at the very beginning, right? Which is what happens when people ascribe bad motive. When someone is just saying, oh, it's because you're evil.
He's a horrible
or
person.
You're a bad person,
Right.
or you're just stupid. Okay, so say someone you might have someone who's say you have someone who's an atheist or even someone who's a theist, and they think you have an atheist who just thinks people believe in God because they're stupid. Right? That's their starting point. Or you have someone who's a theist, or you just simply don't believe in God because they're malevolent, or also they're stupid. Right? And it's like that's the least charitable possible version of events.
Well, and it's not even true. You know, I think
course
about
it's not true.
I think about that with people who vote. Look, I didn't vote for Biden, so I look
Yeah.
at people who voted for Biden. If I were to say they're all stupid,
No.
I mean, give me a break.
Yeah.
You're telling me tens of millions of people are stupid? No, of course not.
Exactly. And
Some of them are, but that's separate than the fact. You know what I mean?
It's also extraordinarily arrogant.
Sure.
Right? Because you're automatically saying, well, I'm obviously smarter than all these people, right? An atheist who just thinks everyone who believes in God is like, you're just saying that billions of people are just stupid. And
Right.
you're by definition smarter than them.
Right.
Which actually in itself, the fact you even think that way is evidence that you're not that smart. Right? If you think it's that simple, you're really not as smart as you think you are. Right? Because there are, millions, hundreds of millions of very, very intelligent people who believe in God. There are millions of very, very intelligent people who don't. So again, look at the epistemology and you may find, okay, we diverge. Okay, we're with each other here, and then here's where we diverge. Right? It's this particular point where that divergence happens. And this happens with many issues. You can do this politically, religiously, whatever it is, right? And that's why I think it's important to start with the agreements. I've used this before. So last year, of course, the BLM thing got really hype in the middle of the year, and people were talking Black Lives Matter, whatever. And you had this it breaks down into this Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter debate or whatever. And I'm like, look, guys, let's take things up a level. Let's go to points of agreement. Do we all agree that the police do we all agree that we'd like to see less unarmed innocent people killed by the police?
Yeah, I think every rational person would say yes, of course.
We all agree.
Of course.
Okay. Do we all agree that forget the movement and the organization? Do we all agree that all Black people's lives matter
Yes.
and are valuable? Yes,
Yes.
we all agree. Do we all agree that all people's lives matter and are valuable? Yeah, cool. We all agree. Okay. Do we all agree that racism and treating people badly or hurting people based on their skin color is bad and we want to see less of it? Cool, we all agree. So actually, already at that stage, you've already brought the All Lives Matter crowd and the Black Lives Matter crowd together.
We're not all that
and
different.
You're like, oh, actually, everyone agrees on the fundamental things here. Okay, so now instead of like screaming mantras back at each other, let's look at potential solutions. And you might find, okay, this is where a divergence
Right.
comes. Maybe that person, maybe this, okay, take what sparked this whole thing, the George Floyd killing. Maybe this person specifically thinks that what happened to George Floyd was somehow racially motivated, right? Or even if it's not George Floyd particularly, this person thinks that there is a systemic or institutional racism issue within the U.S. police, right? This person believes, this person disagrees with that, or maybe they disagree to the degree,
To the extent,
right?
sure.
Maybe they both agree that, okay, racism was clearly a thing in the past. This person still thinks it's a massive problem. This person thinks 2020, like it's not, I don't think that's really the motivation, okay? But regardless, you can find solutions that they both agree with, right? Maybe there's something that happens in the police. I don't know, qualified immunity,
Vetting or training, and everybody would say, yes, let's do more of that.
Yeah, everyone, you might all be able to agree. You know what? Actually, the police, if you're going to work in the police force and you're going to be going around your community with a gun, you should have. I don't know how much training they get, but maybe it should be doubled.
Yeah, it's not significant. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's not that significant. So we all agree. You know what? Actually, they should be trained more, and maybe there should be more psychological evaluation. So you're moving away from the whole racism point, right? You're just like, okay, because of course, more white people get killed by the cops than black people do, right? Which is an important statistic, and a lot of people don't even know that. So if we're all agreeing, okay, police brutality is bad, let's see what can be done to solve that. So sure, maybe there will be 20% of issues that aren't really resolved because people can't see eye to eye or agree. But actually, you've now come away with 80% agreement on the core things, right? The core things. Okay, we're going to leave this meeting and we're going to implement this. All right, we're going to offer more training for the police. We're going to do more vetting. Maybe some of the protections they have that allow them to kind of get away with some stuff that they typically maybe that's going to be changed. Okay, and we've now got 3, 4, 5 policies which we can institute, and this will make a difference. It'll save more Black lives. It'll save more lives. Period. And we'll have less of this issue. And we're not now at each other's throats screaming 3-letter slogans back at each other for years on end.
Right.
And we've actually got something out of this. We're not burning down our communities. We're not but again,
which is good for everybody.
It's good for everybody.
I think the problem here is generally there's a lot of problems, but I think one of the general problems is that we have a third party that we're not addressing here in our scenario, and that third party is the one that likes to poke the bear.
Yes.
And if that third party can get you and me to fight instead of to cooperate, then their interests are served. I'm talking about the media in particular.
Yeah, it is a problem. It is a problem. But what the media does is they play off people's emotions. Right. And they often create narratives which turn neighbor against neighbor. And so what I often say is people need to stop falling for it. This is nothing new. It's nothing new. I mean, propaganda has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so a big way to not fall into all of this stuff is to simply be aware of it. Right? So if I watch the news, which is rare, but in the rare moments that I do watch the news, I'm aware of, okay, this is the news. I'm watching CNN or I'm watching Fox or I'm watching right? I know that they slant this way. Okay? And this one slants this way. And there is some form of narrative or agenda here. Am I watching like the straight down the line news, or am I listening to an opinion piece? Right? If you're listening to Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson or Don Lemon, right? They're giving their opinions. They're giving you some facts, but they're giving you opinions. So keep that in mind, right? Don't just take it as gospel. In fact, if they both say something, if Don Lemon says something and Tucker Carlson says it, you can probably take it as a fact. Right?
Well, I don't even think you need to do that. We all know what a fact is. It doesn't even matter who's saying or who isn't. A fact is a fact. Like, everybody knows the definition of a fact. This is what happened, X, Y, and Z. Now, your perception of it is different, but we all know that.
You'd hope so. I don't know if everybody does, man. We're living in an era where there's your truth and my truth.
That's true.
And his truth and her truth.
That's true.
So I don't know. Also, the media, a lot of the bias isn't in what they say, it's in what they don't say.
Or how they say it. They can twist it, manipulate it.
But the most effective is in what is not said.
How do you mean?
What I mean is it's easier to pick out bias based on what somebody says than what they don't say. Okay? So if I want to... Okay. So I could say on September 11, 2001, the Twin Towers fell due to gravity. Am I lying?
No, you're not lying.
No.
Well, maybe by omission.
I'm omitting something
Sure. Okay.
quite important.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, it's true that
Yes.
gravity is what pulled the building down, but there's an
Yes.
omission there that's kind of important.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. Right. If I say that 140,000 people in the UK have died, their deaths have been linked to COVID. There have been 140,000 COVID-related deaths. Right. That's true. That's different from saying 140,000 people died of COVID directly, but you can do these little sleights of hand.
Right.
You can omit things, whatever. And that's a lot harder to detect than what somebody does say. So oftentimes in the media, the bias is in what they don't say. Okay, here's another example. The January 6th situation. The January 6th Capitol Hill riots, okay? They call that, they'll say it was a deadly insurrection, and they'll say they say 5 or 6 deaths were linked to it. Okay? Only one person, I believe, Ashley Babbitt, the woman who was shot by the Capitol Police.
Sure.
She's the only person who was shot and killed directly
from
at that event.
activity.
There were other people someone who had a stroke. I believe there's 2 people who committed suicide after. Another person I think had a heart. Right. So if you're saying 6 people, you're omitting 6 people died in relation. 6 deaths were linked to the Capitol Hill riots, so therefore it was a deadly insurrection. That paints a very that's
a different
that suggests
picture
to somebody that people were in there with guns having a shootout, and 6 people got that. That's how you're
right. That's how you would interpret that.
That's how the brain works.
Sure.
Right. But actually, they've omitted some important details there, and by the time they've done that, the damage has
it's too late.
Yeah, it's too late.
Right.
You've still now got people who just believe that a whole bunch of people died and were killed or were beaten or whatever as a result of that, and they're now past the stage of looking at the facts. So that's what I mean by the omission and how well that can. Oh, here's another. Oh, let me tell you an amazing one, because even I fell for this. Do you remember the Covington Catholic kids?
Sure.
Remember that kid?
Yep.
Was it Nick Sandman? And
Yep.
he was wearing the MAGA hat, and there was the Native American guy,
and he was smiling,
and you saw that photo and a little clip of video, and it made it look like these young MAGA kids, these young MAGA white kids, were gathering around and intimidating this Native American older gentleman. You zoom out and you watch the longer footage, you see that they're there standing. He approaches them,
right,
beating his drum, and they're just kind of there looking a little bit bewildered as to what is going on, right? So if you see that first clip, and I saw it myself, and I was like, man, that does not look good. Like, it looked like they just kind of ganged up on this guy, and they're there, and it creates this visceral reaction, and then the narrative kind of goes with that, right? Oh man, look at these racist MAGA kids who are, right? The people put their little spin on it and whatever, and they don't tell you. They didn't even approach the guy. Like, he came into them, blah, 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 and then more info comes out, and you're like, whoa, like that was totally different. The bias was by omission. So, I mean, they also kind of lied when they said that they surrounded him.
Yeah, they manipulated some of that, for sure.
They
But I know what you're
manipulated
saying.
it, right? Or they'll take what someone says, and they'll cut out this little segment of a Trump speech. They'll cut out that little bit. They'll cut out that little bit, and you miss the wider context.
That's why I think I've attempted to, anyways, and I haven't always done this, but attempted to give myself like a 24-hour rule. You see something that gets you triggered or upset a little bit, and you're like, okay, if it's news today, it's still going to be news in 24 hours. So just wait. And that has saved me countless times saying something dumb, saying something ignorant, making a commentary and opine on things I have know nothing about. It's like, just breathe. back up. But that goes back to your emotional thing, right? Exactly. Emotional response versus back up, get out of the emotional response, be more logical about it once more data and facts come out.
Exactly. And unfortunately, with social media, people are responded for having like the first hot take.
Yes.
Right? So a news story comes out, right? You're rewarded. Remember Jussie Smollett?
Yep.
Right? You know, this thing happens and boom, you know, people are out there condemning, oh my gosh, like, da da da. I mean, as soon as I heard that story, I was like, wait,
hold on.
Man,
Hold on.
This sounds sketch, right? Wait, so he went out to get a Subway at 3 a.m. He's in, was it Chicago?
I don't even know.
Cold.
He had a sandwich. He didn't let go of the sandwich.
Some guys like with MAGA hats and just holding a noose and bleach. Start like, calling him an N-word and threatening and put a noose around his like.
And these guys knew exactly who he was because they watched that TV show. Or whatever.
I was like, this is sketch. I'm not saying anything about this one
for sure
because this sounds sketch. But instead, you had people, you know, coming out and immediately because by doing that, you get the likes, you get the retweets, you get the social points.
Totally.
And there's often very little accountability for that, right? After the fact comes out, very few people will go put their hands up and say, you know what? I was wrong. I messed up. I jumped to a conclusion. My bad. Whatever. Now it's just go quiet. Move on to the next thing. Because people will
get excited tomorrow about something else, and so you just let them move on to something else.
Exactly, and that's an issue, man. I think if everybody could just be more honest, then the whole world would be a much better place. So many problems in our society are based on lies and lack of honesty and lack of transparency. And there's a difference between it's okay to be wrong, right?
Sure.
Being wrong is much more morally and ethically acceptable than lying, right? There's a big difference there.
Yeah.
If you know something to be true and you put out a falsehood or you're hiding facts or whatever, that is much more dishonorable than it's totally honorable. I totally respect people. There's two simple phrases that automatically make me gain make someone gain my respect. One of them is I don't know, and one of them is I was wrong. Right? And people who can never, ever, ever say either of those two things, that I can't trust someone like that. Right? Because you lack the humility and the honesty to correct yourself or acknowledge the fact that sometimes you get things wrong. And it doesn't matter what level this is. This could be, a politician who's in charge of a country. This could just be, an everyday person, whatever it is. Right? I'm happy to be, because by definition, we always think that we are right. Everybody in the world thinks they're right. If you didn't, you wouldn't hold your positions.
Right. You wouldn't think that you're wrong.
No.
If you think you're lying or manipulating people, I guess, but
yeah, if you think you're wrong, then you change your mind.
Exactly.
So by definition, we all think we're right about everything. And it takes a degree of humility to be able to be like, okay, well, I'm right about some things. I must be wrong about other things. And I'm happy to be corrected. The only way you know anything is because you were wrong before, right? You've got kids.
Yeah.
The only way they learn is by being wrong, right? There was something that they thought or didn't even think about, and you introduce something, which is like, oh, okay, you learn, and you absorb that into your knowledge base in your brain. And then there may be a time where there's something you believe, and then you're provided with better arguments, you're provided with new information, and so you readjust. You take that information, and this is how we learn. That's how you become a knowledgeable, wise person. You keep updating. Every podcast you do, you're updating.
You're learning, developing.
You're learning, evolving. You're developing. Yeah, go back and listen to Joe Rogan interviews from 10 years ago, right? And listen to the ones now. Like the amount of, through thousands of conversations, and he's updated his software so many times by talking to so many knowledgeable people from all around that, yeah, sure, he's still got his opinions, he's still got his beliefs, but there's somewhere, he's changed or he's softened or he's become much more empathetic or whatever. And that's how we all should be. I mean, if you believe all the same things that you did last year, let alone 5 years ago or 10 years ago, then you're you're a stagnating.
Yeah, what have you been doing with the past
being.
5 years?
Yeah, you're a stagnating human being. So you should always be updating every day. Your software should be updating slightly based on new information, new conversations, different arguments. And I'm someone who has a lot of convictions and certain beliefs that I have, but I also update my software pretty rapidly. If there's something I've said on this podcast and someone's like, oh, like that was just factually wrong. Look, here's the data or here's the stats. And I'm like, oh, good point. Yeah, my bad. I was wrong.
Right.
Okay. Adjust, update. Yeah. Next time I'm like, okay, cool. That's what the information is.
People make a bigger deal of it than they need to. It's like, yeah, I was wrong. And here's one. You probably got this. People say, well, 2 years ago I found a tweet and you said this, which is counter to what you're saying today. But yeah, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I have changed my opinion or I have changed the way that I view things. It's so interesting to me that people will bring up something that you said in the past and try to knock you on it because of what you said today. It's like, well, you should be evolving. I like that phrase, updating your software. You should be doing that.
Yeah.
The things that you said before, and this actually goes back to what you were saying earlier, and I did want to ask because you said, sometimes I'm just thinking out loud. I can definitely see how that would be a good reflective moment, an opportunity for you to clear your thoughts, but do you feel like you put your foot in your mouth more often than you should because you do that? You were talking about the trade-offs. So there's got to be a trade-off of thinking out loud and just putting it out there versus really pondering, reflecting, thinking about it, and then putting it out there.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I do a bit of both. Right? And I think that how I put things out there, I don't know, like the internet makes it difficult to understand tone and motivation. But I think that there's a difference between the way I write something where it's like, okay, I've really, really thought about this and this is me presenting my position or my argument versus something where I'm just like, here's a thought. What do you guys sort of think of this?
Right. That's a good, good point.
So to me, I don't feel like I put my foot in my mouth at all, really, because those are two different things. And oftentimes I'm just trying to open up a conversation. I'm just trying to open up a conversation. And sometimes the best way to do that is to make a statement rather than ask a question. Sometimes the best way is to ask a question. Sometimes I'll put up a poll because I'm just contemplating an idea myself. And I don't know. I'm just, hey, what do you guys think? Let me put this out to a couple 100,000 people.
Right.
What do you guys think of this idea? Right? Does this make sense to you or does that? And that, again, that's how we learn. And I like to be, I think something I'm blessed with my audience is that I can be a node for everybody to learn in that sense, right? Hopefully by me doing that, then all of my followers and everyone involved in the conversation, they're now, I've created a forum. So sure, I brought the initial proposition to the table, but now all these other thousands of people in different countries are now having this discussion and they're updating their software.
Sure.
And they're seeing different perspectives. And not all of my followers think the same at all, right? I've got like a very diverse audience. So I can put out somewhere, someone finds this totally objectionable or they have this really different perspective, someone else, and now they're having conversations. Sometimes I'm not even involved. There's stuff that I tweeted 3 days ago, and right now, as we're speaking,
still people
are talking about it, and they're discussing and back and forthing with each other. I'm not even part of the conversation anymore, but they're still going, and I'm like, cool, awesome, right? I got them talking. I got them talking.
Right.
I got them thinking. I kept that doorway open of communication, and again, hopefully, even if those people end up disagreeing, I see sometimes some huge back and forth going on in my thing, and then sometimes it comes to a point where they're like, you know what, like. Sometimes it devolves into people insulting each other.
Yes.
But sometimes it's like, you know what? I've never heard, I'll be reading the tweet. I'm not even in the conversation and I'll be like, you know what? Like, I've never heard that. I've never heard your perspective before. Like, thanks for the civil conversation. Right. And then both of those people walk away. Cool. They've slightly updated their software. Now they understand that different perspective. And maybe they think that person's not a monster. One interesting concept I heard was that, I can't remember who said it was, but that everybody is a moral monster to someone else. Right? So whatever your belief system, political, religious, ideological, social, there is somebody out there who thinks that your views are reprehensible. Right? You believe in God, you're a Christian, that's reprehensible. You are, you're pro-life. You support guns. How, like, what? You're this. You're like. and this is not to get into, what people would call, what's the term, moral relativism, but it's interesting to understand that there's people out there who think that, you and I are, we're some kind of messengers of hate or division, and we're right. Like there's people who believe that, right?
Genuinely believe that.
Yeah, of course I think they're totally wrong, right? But there are people who I'm some person's least favorite Twitter account.
Yeah,
there's people out there who, man, the freaking the ZUBY guy, man, like he's right. Like to them, there's people who think that of Jordan Peterson.
Right.
There's people who think that of Ben Shapiro, whoever it is. Like this guy's like, I've spoken to some people who have. I was speaking to someone, they're like, man, like I used to think Ben Shapiro was the devil. Like the first time I saw his content and he was just that out there, like, and then over time they were like, he's making some good points.
Right,
Okay,
sure.
maybe this little, yarmulke wearing conservative Orthodox Jew isn't as bad as I thought he was, right? He's making some points. I don't agree with him on everything. But he's clearly not.
Well, that would also be weird if you agreed with everybody on everything. That'd be a very strange thing.
Exactly. And that's the truth. Ultimately, even with people who you really, really strongly disagree with on some things, and this can be hard to sort of accept because I think as human beings we like to have an enemy, just like we like to have friends.
Yeah.
And we like to have allies. We sort of like to have an enemy. We like to have a foil. So
I think it makes you feel important. I think it gives you a sense of like fulfillment and duty. Like, okay, there's my enemy. That's the battle I'm going to fight. And so like, I actually have something meaningful to do.
And oftentimes it's like that person isn't sure. They could be your opponent in certain ideological realms, but opponent or adversary to me is different from enemy.
Oh, definitely.
Right.
I mean, I think about that on the football field. Like, yes, that other team, that's your opponent.
Yes.
But they're also cooperating with you.
Yes.
Because you've agreed so much to this concept of cooperation and bettering yourselves that you've decided voluntarily to bring a third party in, referees, to ensure that you follow an agreed upon set of rules. You're cooperating with each other to make each other better.
And that's part of the value of sport, right? You learn how to win gracefully, lose gracefully. You learn that your opponents and your rivals are not necessarily mortal enemies,
yes,
etc. You learn how to handle things in a good and mature way. And I think we need more of this in the social conversation. We need more of this in politics, etc. Right? And also, especially in this age of social media and with people being public figures, is unless you know them personally, you often don't know what somebody is like. Like I've often said that I bet 99% of people who believe that they don't like me, or maybe even there might be someone out there who thinks that they hate me. I can nearly guarantee that if we met in real life, they'd like me.
Of course.
I can nearly guarantee that. Right. And this is the case with many other people. There are people out there who I'm like, man, like I kind of think this person, based off their personal public persona or maybe their Twitter, I'm like, man, this person is just like an a-hole. Right. But who knows? Maybe they are. But also maybe if you met that person in the real world, you'd actually be like, nah, you know what? Like this guy's all right. You know, like
that's what you're thinking about me, right? This Ryan guy come here like, okay,
he's all right. You know, I'll do his podcast. He's okay. But yeah, that's the reality. And a big reason why this happens in social media is because the interaction happens backwards. If you meet people in real life, you don't start with politics and religion and
all
like
of their
super
deepest
strong
opinions and thoughts. And
if you come across someone you don't follow on Twitter, you're often the first thing you often see is something that's very charged.
Of course.
And maybe in the wrong direction, or you even look at their profile and you look at their bio and it's like, oh gosh, they've got the right. I'll be honest, right? I have my own prejudices, right? If I look at someone's profile and I see the freaking, hashtag BLM,
or pronouns
rainbow
or
flag,
something like
pronouns,
that. Sure, of course.
You know, democratic socialist or whatever. I'm like, oh, geez, like this person's going to be, you know, similarly, if they see someone with an American flag and hashtag MAGA, Christian conservative, whatever, they're like, oh, geez, like this person's like a freaking demon, right?
Yeah.
But actually, if they met just, their kids' baseball practice
Right,
or
they
whatever,
probably
and they're
wouldn't
just
even talk
talking,
about any
right?
of that stuff.
They're just talking. Oh yeah, Jim's a good guy. Like he's a
Yeah.
good guy. Like you don't even know if he's a Republican or a Democrat.
Well, do you know Jim has pronouns in his bio though?
Exactly.
You wouldn't talk
Exactly.
about
Or
that.
is he, or is he vaccinated? Like
Yeah,
who
that's true.
freaking knows? People that talking about vaccinated. I'm like, bro, you don't even know who's.
No.
Like every day you're walking around. If you live in the USA, every day you're walking past people who are, especially if you're in a big city, you're walking past people who are vaccinated, unvaccinated. It's different things. Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, Christians, Jews, Muslims. Like you're constantly surrounded by all these people. And in the real world, it's not a problem.
It doesn't matter.
Right? People don't even care. They barely notice. You'd have to get pretty deep in a conversation to even reach some of these ideological
Yes.
split points. So if we could, I think this is just one of the flaws of social media, and I don't think there's like an easy way around it. But if people can constantly remember that, you are dealing with a human being, and people are more nuanced than they appear
Right.
online. People generally are also nicer
Yes.
in the real world
Yes,
than they
of
are
course. 'Cause
online.
there's more consequences to not being nice.
Yes, there are. So,
Well, Zuby, one of the things that you're doing, and just for the sake of time, I want to bring this up, is that you've been traveling all over the U.S. So I'd love for you to let the guys know, where maybe some of the places you're going to be. And then also, guys, if you would, just go connect with Zuby wherever. Twitter is where he's most active. That way you can figure out where he's going to be, and you can take some of these conversations online, take them offline, where they actually become real purpose-driven and meaningful when you're doing it face-to-face.
yeah, most definitely. And I've been trying to arrange meetups in the different cities I'm traveling to. So, of course, right now I'm in Maine, but I'm also, I don't know when this podcast comes out.
This will be Tuesday of next week. So what's
Okay.
that? That's like the
Okay.
6th or 7th of September.
Okay,
somewhere in
so by the time this comes out, I'll be in New York. I'm going to DC, Maryland, Maui, Los Angeles, potentially Vegas, Nashville, Atlanta, and Raleigh, North Carolina. That's what I know so far. So if you're in any of those cities, don't hesitate to reach out. Maybe I can get you to a meetup. And you can find me on all social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at ZUBY Music. That's ZUBY Music. If you want to check out my new album, it's called Word of ZUBY. It's available on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere else. Just search for my name. And you can also check out my podcast as well, Real Talk for ZUBY. Just search for my name, ZUBY, and you will find me on any platform.
Right on, brother. I appreciate you.
No doubt,
I'm
Ryan.
so glad. This is round 2. You're on the podcast earlier, and to be able to do it face-to-face where you're here, spending time with the family, this is way better. So
No doubt, man.
glad you come out. We can make this happen.
I appreciate you, bro.
Appreciate it.